Hello, everyone, and welcome to Back of the Grid. I'm your host this week, Chris, and I'm joined just by Tom this week.
Hi.
Stu's off doing more interesting things, apparently. Well, he has sent a question, so he's involved in in one way or another.
He's going to be involved.
We are here to talk about the Canadian Grand Prix, which I've seen some mixed opinions of, but I thought that was a really entertaining race. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what you compare it to, I think. If you compare it to other Canadian Grand Prix, not necessarily the best one. We've had a lot of good ones over the years, but when you compare it to just processional, like boring races, it was an entertaining one. So
Yeah.
I think it depends on where you're holding the yardstick that you're comparing it to, if I'm totally honest.
Yeah, that's fair. There's definitely like a little bit of a lull at one point. We had a bit of a train, a bit of the spirit of Yarno Trulli came back for a little while, but
there were elements of the train though that I found interesting. Like there was a bit where you had nearly 10 cars kind of all within a couple of seconds of the one at the front, which kind of it was about like there was a point where like Norris was involved in that, which I'm sure we'll get to, where like it was about who was going to be the bold person to pressure someone in front into a mistake or make a lunge, and there were one or two drivers trying to take advantage of that, and I found that interesting, even if others thought it was a little bit processional.
Yeah, same. And it was strategically interesting as well. I think with them taking the softest tyres possible, it would force everyone into at least a two-stop, which or the majority of people into a two-stop, which also made things interesting.
Yeah.
But we'll start, as usual, at the front with Verstappen, who won again. His fourth win in a row. It's his sixth win in 8 this season now. Lots of records set this race as well, or milestones, I guess. It's Verstappen's 41st win in F1, which brings him level with Ayrton Senna. So he's equal 5th most wins of all time now. It was also Red Bull's 100th Grand Prix win. They're only the 5th constructor to pass that total now. Interestingly, I've done that 100 wins with only 5 drivers winning races for them as well, which is, I think, just shows the majority of them I've had.
The majority of them is Verstappen or Vettel. That's probably why.
Yeah, pretty much. And then like handful for Ricciardo, handful for Webber, handful for Perez. Also, I mean, obviously there's different ways of measuring this, but technically it's also Adrian Newey's 200th win as a designer of F1 cars as well, which is a ludicrous milestone.
Yep.
But yeah, it was also Verstappen's biggest pole position margin. He was over 1.2 seconds ahead of the whole rest of the field, which is the biggest margin he's had all season. He's led every lap for 3 races in a row now. No one's done that since Vettel in 2012. In fact, Verstappen has led every lap since lap 47 in Miami. Wow. That's the level of dominance we're talking about here.
There's something like, is it 210 laps or something he's at now, I think?
Something like that, yeah.
Like it's quite a high number, yeah.
I mean, what can you say? It's just continues to look just utterly unstoppable. 69 points clear of Perez now, who we'll get to. You just kind of run out of superlatives when it's a period of dominance like this, don't you? Like,
yeah, I mean, the guy's untouchable right now. Like, it's just, I'm finding it hard to look beyond him for a win. Like we've talked about it already. The only thing that can stop him winning at the moment, realistically, is something going on with the car or the team or something like that. Yeah. Like he's barely putting a foot wrong, and even when he is, he's got that much in hand that it's not making a huge amount of difference. Like, I mean, jumping backwards a little bit, but you've only got to look at like the quali lap in Monaco, for example, where he gained all that time in like literally 2 corners at the end of the lap. Like, he can not be on his best form and still be on better form than the majority, if not all of that grid, which is mental to think. and he's still
Yeah,
only
I mean,
25.
yeah, ridiculous. I mean, I guess we can kind of maybe jump ahead and talk about Perez now, because obviously he went out in Q2 again in the mixed conditions. So he started 12th. He did the kind of reverse strategy of hards to mediums, but actually he also did a second stop to do softs at the end to get fastest lap. But like he only climbed from 12th to 6th. Whereas again, if Verstappen had a bad qualifying and started 12th, you'd kind of still expect him to win because that's just what he does. And
Yeah.
Perez just didn't have that. I mean, I've seen over the last couple of days all of the usual Red Bull second driver is struggling. Are they going to even see out the season type headlines? And I think that's pretty premature, but he is going through a tough patch.
Yeah, and it's a shame because I think, as again we've talked about previously, that this run in the calendar in the schedule was like his to stay in touch with and potentially throw a gauntlet to Max, and with races like Austria coming up next, like Silverstone, Spa, Holland. Holland, I can't call it that, kind of Netherlands example. Like with races like that, I find it hard to see where Checo's going to outdo Max at places like that.
Yeah,
I think
totally.
the only one I can genuinely see in the next stretch before we start like heading towards flyaways again is probably Hungary. Like I just
Yeah,
genuinely can't see him being competitive, or at least not to the level he needs to be, anywhere but Hungary. And then after you hit flyaways, like Singapore is a street circuit, maybe.
maybe.
Um,
Yeah,
but again,
but
then I'm starting to struggle. I mean, Mexico home crowd, yes, but Max is good there too.
yeah,
So
and
he,
even then, it's those handful of races still aren't nearly enough.
yeah, exactly. I mean, he needs what 3 full race wins without Max scoring to just
Yeah,
get level again now, doesn't he? That's the position
and
he's finding himself in.
it doesn't feel like that long ago we were sat here telling people like the gap's only like 14 or 15 points. Like he's still in this. Like he can still
Yeah,
bring back. And in space of 3 or 4 races, it's just become a cavern.
yep,
Um, yeah, difficult times. He's obviously got work to do for Perez. He's obviously not happy with the way he's driving right now with the results he's getting. Really hope to see him bounce back in some fashion. But
yeah.
as you say, that gap is just already looking insurmountable unless Verstappen starts having bad luck. Ultimately, is what's going to stop Verstappen at this
Yeah,
point.
that's it. And I guess to sort of lead into talking about Alonso next, I saw something over the weekend that was basically saying if you scored the championship without Max, as in, you know, second down as the winner, Alonso would actually be ahead of Perez at this point,
Yes, I saw that as well. Yeah,
which is very interesting. I mean, it's close as it is anyway, but I think it's quite interesting that had it not been for Verstappen just driving away with things, that it would be a slightly different story.
yeah. So moving on to Alonso, obviously ended up starting on the front row for reasons we'll get to later on. Uh, Lost second at the start, but he had the pace to reel Hamilton back in and pass him. This was actually the closest Alonso's finished to Verstappen all season. Um, so he retook second not that long after the safety car, and the gap was 2.7. And by the end of the race, it was only 9.5, which is still a long way in F1 terms, but that's far and away the closest he's been. Now,
Yeah,
there's a few factors at play here. On one hand, Alonso, well, Aston Martin had a pretty big upgrade package, which seems to be working. However, Alonso is also nursing a potential fuel issue in the closing stages. He was having to lift and coast.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, Verstappen had a bird stuck in one of his brake ducts, and he was also very much cruising. So it's hard to know exactly what the pace of those two cars were, but considering how big the qualifying gap was, the race gap definitely, even in the early stages, Verstappen didn't seem to drive away from people quite as quickly as we've seen in the past.
Yeah. Part of me wonders how much of that is like preservation from him and Red Bull, of kind of being in a position of knowing now, like, I'm easily the quickest out there in combination with me in this car. I mean, Verstappen is not the kind of person to hold back. We know that. But is there an element of that creeping in that, like, he's not quite been at full throttle this weekend, do you think?
It's the Alan Prost approach, isn't it? To win a race at the slowest possible speed and bring the car home in as good a condition as you can.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think there is a bit of that because, I mean, there's no need for them to. There's absolutely no use in them going and driving that car flat out because A, they're showing their hand, and B, it's just putting unnecessary stress on components.
Yeah. I think it's a bit of a flip-flop, like a multiple personality for Max. Like, there's times where he wants to go gung-ho and wants, to be the fastest regardless. And then there's moments where he maybe has these realizations that, yeah, the team's right. Like, I have the pace to back off a little bit here and, reserve something to make the engine last longer and the other components last longer. So I think that more mature side of him, I guess, coming through, that we've said that you've sort of seen develop through his career. Maybe it's an element of that.
Yeah, could well be. But that said, the upgrades on the Aston, at least at this circuit, did seem to be doing the business.
Yeah.
Because the worry was always that they'd start well and everybody else would gradually catch them up, but they do seem to be keeping that car going in the right direction.
Yeah, and I mean, again, I'm just transitioning you early, but I think that Mercedes turned up here and showing that, what they've done is looking like a good all-round update as well. I mean, we talked about what they needed to show here to prove that it wasn't like a flash in the pan in other places. So it's looking promising for them, isn't it?
Yeah, didn't have Alonso pace, but still very much third fastest team. Second podium in a row now for Hamilton.
Mm-hmm.
Russell was looking pretty good for P4 until he put it in the wall trying to chase Alonso.
Yeah.
Bit of a silly mistake. It just seems to take way too much curb mid corner and back end into the wall.
He managed to get the front and the back end into the wall. He hit it that hard.
And he was actually able to rejoin the race after that. And then ultimately it was a brake issue that put him out of the race finally.
Yeah, they were overheating. So whether it was related to like damage from that, like damage to the brake ducts or something, causing issues with cooling, but you could kind of see it coming for a while. And to be fair to Julian Palmer, like watching it live on F1 TV coverage, he called it quite quickly, of noticing that Russell was pulling out of the slipstream of anyone he was following, and sort of attributing it to that looks like it could be brakes, like tyres look okay, other temps are probably going to be okay. He's quite possibly done some damage to brake cooling in his incident, and lo and behold, 10 laps later or whatever it was, 15 laps later, he was retiring with brake issues. So, yeah.
Second retirement of the season now for Russell. Drops him down to 6th in the Drivers' Championship behind Sainz. Speaking of, did Ferrari? Did I just see Ferrari like do strategy well and have good tyre wear?
Good tyre wear, I think, was the surprising bit. The strategy was mainly down to Sainz, I think, because they definitely want him to do something other than what he ended up doing. But yeah, whether they've found a source of the issue there, or whether it's circuit specific is another matter. But they looked better. They looked a lot better. And I mean, they were still probably, fourth fastest overall, but ended up finishing the race in a much better position with good race pace, with good strategy, and taking advantage of the sorrows of others, which is quite surprising.
Yeah. Sarah in the chat's pointing out that they had some guests from the Le Mans team with them there, so maybe that explains a lot.
Could well be. Got them on the strategy team.
I guess we should start by saying that their good result was despite qualifying, which was kind of botched. I mean,
it's like the opposite way around for Ferrari this weekend, really, because usually the one lap pace and the qualifying potential's there, and the race pace is the problem, or the tyre wears causing issues with the race pace. And this weekend it felt like the other way around. They botched all the qualifying, but had a much better race experience.
Yeah, Sainz is one of several drivers to get a grid penalty for blocking other drivers in qualifying.
Yes.
And then Leclerc ended up going out in Q2 because they decided to leave him out on inters when everybody else was going faster on slicks. And then it started raining again and they missed the window, which was just very silly. But yeah, they both started on mediums. They were the only cars other than hard tyre runners who didn't pit under the safety car, which promoted them up to 4th and 5th. And yeah, they took the mediums past the halfway point of the race, by which point they'd got enough of a gap to pit and hold 4th and 5th. They definitely helped a bit by the kind of relative pace of everyone behind them was quite slow when they were sort of in that train for a while. But even so, that was a really good race for Ferrari. I mean, the fact that we're calling 4th and 5th for Ferrari a good race tells a story of their season. But even so, yeah, pretty good.
Yeah, a result they needed that they can hopefully build on. Let's put it that way.
Very much so. Who else? We've done Perez. Let's talk about Williams. It's not very often we talk about Williams this early in the podcast.
Yeah, it's not often we get this good news, to be fair.
I mean, Alex Albon. First of all, he was fastest in Q2 in mixed conditions, which gave him P9 on the grid after the various penalties. He also pitted under the safety car and then just stayed out on the hards. 58 laps he did on those hard tyres.
Yeah.
The team just at one point not telling him how much longer was left in the race because they knew he wouldn't like the answer. And yeah, held everyone off, finished 7th. Again, kind of helped by pace of people behind. I think Russell being behind and being hobbled definitely helped for a while. But regardless, such a good drive from Albon.
Yeah. Good. I mean, the thing is, he was leading that train for a while, the DRS train, and he wasn't giving up positions. Like, it was being the lead car and being in a car that's sort of been notoriously towards the back of the pack for a fair while. You would have expected him to have been gradually swallowed up by everyone behind him one by one. And
I think it was only really Perez that passed him, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really remember. Well, when you look at the pack, like, he's got Ocon behind him, Stroll behind him, Bottas doing well in an Alfa Romeo, to be fair, that still has question marks around it. But then you've got like Piastri and Norris in the McLarens. Like, there was a whole host of talented drivers with what you would probably say are better cars behind him. So to maintain the pace and keep them behind him with the tyre situation as well, I think I've got nothing but praise for that drive from Albon. Shows why he's where he is and why he got brought back to Formula One.
Yeah, very much so. Williams' best result of the season, only their second points of the season as well since Bahrain. It actually moves them up ahead of AlphaTauri in constructors. AlphaTauri now rooted to the bottom. Williams up into 9th. Yeah. We should mention Sargent as well. He had a pretty tough weekend. He was only Albon that got the upgrade package. Then with all of the CCTV nonsense in practice one, it meant he missed out on a whole practice session of a track he's never driven at before. So
Yeah,
not an ideal
not
start.
ideal.
He actually started the race all right. He was kind of in the mix early on, but retired quite early on with an oil leak, which was unfortunate.
Yeah.
Next down the road was Ocon. Ocon managed to hold off Stroll and the McLarens in the closing stages in that train to finish 8th, despite his rear wing just flapping around and wobbling all over the place.
Yeah, he was dangerously close to a meatball flag, I think.
I'm so surprised he didn't get one.
I think whether nobody noticed it before, the first time it came to my attention, I kind of, not long before Norris pointed it out, basically, I thought I'd sort of seen what was a bit of a, like a wobbly rear wing on that car, but then just thought kind of nothing of it, like maybe he just clipped a curb a bit hard, like it looks like that sometimes. But then Norris pops over the radio saying the rear wing of this Alpine is all over the place. It looks like it's going to fall off. And then you could see, like, even on the really long helicopter type shots, you could see it like down at ground level wobbling away. Like, yeah, it definitely shouldn't be moving that much. Shouldn't be moving that much.
So strange. Yeah, he got pretty lucky there, I think, to get away with that. McLaren, another no points race for McLaren. They're second in a row, I believe. Norris finished in the points.
Sorry, I was just going to point something out about that.
Go on.
I need to fact check this at some point, but it was said during the race that McLaren haven't had a points finish in Canada since 2014. Oof. And I was like mind blown by that statistic. And then this weekend just adds to that.
I can believe that, to be honest.
I mean, we missed 2, didn't we? Because we missed 2020 and 2021. So that's 2 of them. There was the Honda era where they wouldn't have been scoring it. So, like when I look back at it logically, yes, it makes sense. But it was just one of those, like, by next year, that's a decade, technically, albeit with 2 races missing. But by next year, that'll be a decade without points. So,
Chat are saying that Jenson Button was the last McLaren driver to score points in Canada.
There you go.
Crazy. They finished in the points this race, but Norris had a 5-second penalty, I think it was, for unsportsmanlike behaviour, which is, I don't remember ever seeing that as the penalty in Formula One, or not for a very, very long time. Essentially, he backed up the pack under the safety car so the team could do a double stack. But why they decide to call that unsportsmanlike behaviour, I don't know. Normally, they just say, like, driving too slowly behind the safety car.
Yeah, or the fact that, the rule is that it should be an X number of car length. What is it? So many cars length between you and the next? Or is that between you and the safety car when you're the leading car? I bet, do you know what? I'll bet this is one of those stupid FIA ambiguous rules that only applies to certain drivers in certain positions. So the rule, just the straightforward rule of did not maintain a 10-car length gap, doesn't apply. So they've had to go around the houses to give a stupidly worded penalty for doing the same sort of thing.
Yeah, but maybe.
It just feels weird that it's got punished as it has here, but very rarely gets punished unless it's like blatant. And weirdly, I don't know if this was the same on all broadcasts, but I didn't even see a replay of it shown until after the race. It was after the race that they showed why you got the penalty from F1 TV coverage, from what I remember. They didn't review it at the time.
I know there's one in the highlights, but they may well have just like shoehorned that in afterwards.
Yeah. And I've got another gripe with it, actually, to be fair. In theory, it worked out better for McLaren and Norris to some degree, but that happened on lap 19, if I remember rightly. He then pitted at the end of lap 38, start of lap 39, somewhere like that. and then he got given the penalty basically as he was exiting the pits. It's almost like they let him pit to then give him the penalty afterwards. Like,
That took
how does it
such a
take
long time over
20
it.
laps to decide that, yep, he's definitely slowed down unfairly. Let's give him the penalty. Like, in the grand scheme of things, it probably would have worked out better for him that he didn't get the penalty to serve during the pit stop, because he then had less traffic to deal with, because obviously it would put him behind more people. So he probably gained from it. But I just think it's stupid that it took 20 laps to make a decision on that.
Like, I don't have a huge problem with... In isolation, I think a penalty is probably warranted for that. But yeah, like, the way it was applied and took so long was just, yeah, very odd.
Mm.
I mean, I guess say something positive about McLaren, like, they both got through to Q3. They seem to have qualifying pace, but even in the race, they had, like, at times seemed to have pretty good pace, but yeah, it didn't quite work out for them.
To be fair to them both, two of the better overtakers all race between them.
Yeah.
I can guarantee you that when it comes to move of the day in a minute, both of them are getting a nomination, if not multiple.
For sure.
So positives for McLaren there was the raciness of the drivers, given the situations they were in.
Yeah, still a big upgrade to come from McLaren, so they still have stuff to hope for, at least. Haas next. Man, Hulkenberg sticking it P2 in qualifying. Out of nowhere.
And then the universe promptly ripping it from him.
Yeah, it's a shame in threw it away by driving too fast under a red flag. Like, there seem to be so many drivers just getting, like, procedural things like that wrong.
So
during qualifying in particular.
I've not been back or watched any analysis of this. How bad is it? Because to my knowledge, he finished his lap under normal conditions, and just after he crossed the line is when the red flag came out. So surely he's on a slow down lap anyway, like, regardless if it's a red flag, and he's not going to be at race pace anyway. Like, I just found it really odd that he's ended up with this penalty in the situation that he was in. And I don't know if anyone's, like, other than me, has gone and, like, back and analysed it in any detail.
Yeah, I mean, there was just no reason for him to be going as fast as he was at that point. It was a pretty silly thing to do. I mean, ultimately, I don't think he probably made much difference to their result. Once again, Haas just have one lap pace and no race pace whatsoever. All they do is go backwards in races.
Yep.
I mean, where did he finish in the end, Hulkenberg? 15th, a lap down.
Yep.
I don't think the difference between second and fifth on the grid or whatever it was going to make a huge difference to them.
Yeah, but with dropping the clutch at the right moment, he could have been, like, alongside Max Verstappen into turn one, which would have been hilarious.
Oh, you know, he'd have sent it into turn one.
Exactly.
Couple of other bits before we move on to the awards. No penalties for unsafe releases. Hamilton and Norris in particular.
Yeah.
What did you make of those?
So the Hamilton one, initially, I looked at it like, oh, that's a penalty. But then when you see it from Alonso's on board, it's not, in my opinion. So I think the way Hamilton came out and Alonso reacted from the angle that you saw it from, like, the exit of the pits, like looking down the pit lane, it looked very much like an unsafe release. But then when you sort of see all the angles together, I think it's fair. The Norris one, I am surprised he actually got away with that one, because the difference in the two for me is, like, Alonso didn't have to make an adjustment for Hamilton, whereas who was it that Albon he came out on? Was it Ocon for Norris? I feel like it was Ocon.
One of the Alpines, maybe, yeah.
Yeah, but whoever it was had to lift. You heard the lift, and it's funny because, like, this is one of the races this season where Emily sat and watched the whole thing live with me, and she was weirdly, she got it straight away because she thought initially Hamilton was going to get a penalty. And then I was sort of explaining to her, it'll depend, if he's impeded Alonso behind him. So could well be, but let's see. But then with the Norris one, she was like, oh, Lando's going to get a penalty. I see what you mean. I see the difference now. And she was saying, it's like when someone pulls out of a junction on you in the road. As long as they get up to speed and you don't have to slow down, it's fine. It's when they pull out and then the door tolls, but it's a problem. Yeah, exactly. Kind of like that, I guess. But yeah, it was a good little analogy. But I think even that shows that Lando is a bit lucky that someone who's only just learned how that rule worked looked at it and went, "Ooh, I think he's going to be in trouble for that."
Yeah, I think he got quite lucky there. And then De Vries and Magnussen, after banging wheels for a few corners, just drove off the track together. I mean, De Vries just went in so deep and basically left Magnussen nowhere to go, and they just both. It was like one of the silliest offs I've ever seen in F1.
It was clumsy, wasn't it? I mean,
clumsy.
Would you put all the blame with De Vries on that one?
I mean, he was going up the inside and missed the corner, and Magnussen essentially had to take avoiding action by just staying straight. So I think there was maybe an argument that De Vries should have got a penalty for that. But very strange, very silly.
It was an odd one. And then the clumsiness of having them both having to try and find reverse and carefully back out of that little sort of run-off road that's there.
And then one of the reverse out in front of Verstappen leading the race as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, messy. Should we do some awards?
Yeah, let's look at this. I'm intrigued on your thoughts. I find it hard to look past Albon just because it's an unexpected result. Max has done a good job. He's led from the front. He's an extraordinarily long streak of laps led and so on and so forth. But I don't think there's anything stellar in it. It was quite procedural. Yeah. Alonso and Hamilton both have very good drives, had a little fight between themselves, but again, all fairly, to procedure. The Albon one really stands out as being he's got that car somewhere it probably shouldn't have been.
Yeah.
And it's way above the merit of the car.
He was a very Albon drive as well, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, saving the tyres to get to that position and then holding on to them to defend, very much an Albon drive. Very much.
I thought both the McLaren... It's a shame the McLaren guys didn't make it into the points, but I thought both of them, they were good drives and very entertaining drives as well. That provided a lot of the entertainment and the fun in that race. But yeah, I agree with you. I think it has to be Albon.
That's good then.
What about move of the day?
I mean, it's going to a McLaren for me. I think Norris at the hairpin was a pleasure all race. Even if he didn't get the move done, just knowing that he was so quick out of turn 9 and getting that huge run on people into the hairpin and just having the stones to leave it so late as well. But always tidy and clean. Well. Yeah, one of them on his own teammate. But yeah, he was always tidy and clean with it. He knew when it wasn't going to work and when he was beaten and when to back out of it. And I mean, you heard the crowd at that hairpin over the laps where he was chasing people. It was something spectacular for them to see. I think if I was going to sit somewhere at the Canadian Grand Prix, I'd sit somewhere near that hairpin.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was a number of them. There was one, I feel like it was one of the Haasers that he went round the outside of as well.
Yeah, he did Magnussen around the outside at turn 1.
Yep, that one.
There's also Piastri got Hulkenberg at turn 1, which was good, but that was a slightly more conventional overtake. So I think my pick is that Magnussen one at turn 1 for Norris if I had to pick one of them.
Oh, I'm torn now because I really liked the one on Piastri at the hairpin.
We can definitely agree either way. It's Norris.
Because yes, fair enough. There's an element of teammates maybe being a little more sort of giving each other a bit more elbow room in those scenarios. But I mean, Piastri gave him as little room as he possibly could. Like he wasn't like he was letting him by because it's his teammate. It was a battle for position.
They were properly racing.
So yeah, a tie. Let chat decide it. The first person in chat to decide between one of those, and that can be what the points go to. There you go. Oh, Norris. That doesn't help, Jose. That does not help. Norris on Piastri. There you go.
There we go. There's your winner. And then final award. Couple of things spring to mind. I mean, Ferrari's qualifying performance, especially just leaving Leclerc on Inters when everyone else was switching to slicks, was ridiculous.
Yep.
The De Vries and Magnussen off, which we just talked about, was silly. The wobbly wing.
Wobbly wing.
I tell you what I want to only give it to, though.
Go on.
So we turned up on Friday and they've put a new wall at the exit of sort of turn 1 around turn 2. And all the drivers were like, that's horribly dangerous. That means that when we rejoin, we have to rejoin halfway around turn 2 at 90 degrees to traffic. So the FIA went, oh yeah, don't worry, we've got this, we'll fix it. And they just removed one section of it, which made the wall about 5 foot shorter, and if anything made the problem slightly worse. Like, luckily, like, nobody, as far as I remember, went off at turn 1 the whole race. But man, that was ridiculous. The fact they're like, yeah, we hear you, we'll fix it. Like, clearly you're not listening because you haven't fixed it.
That, or another FIA related one, really, is cancelling an entire session because CCTV doesn't work. Like, I was sort of flabbergasted by that. Like, you're literally at a sport where every corner has at least one camera pointed at it. Every corner has at least one camera pointed at it. What is so important about the CCTV specifically that the whole session must be cancelled? Like, I don't get it. I just don't get it. It was. I mean, my reaction to you two when you were discussing it in the chat, and you said, "I can't believe they just cancelled the session for CCTV." I think I literally typed WTF. So, yeah, I think that's up there for me as well.
Yeah, that was particularly bad. Actually, we can give it that.
Yeah,
it just, like you say, like it just sounds so utterly stupid. Of all the reasons to cancel a session.
Yeah. I mean, delay the start of it or something and, like, try and solve the problem and start it and only have, like, 40 minutes or something, or, like, let it run a little bit longer, delay the schedule slightly. Surely there were better options than let's just cancel it because CCTV doesn't work. Just seems mental.
Yeah, just like there weren't even, as far as I'm aware, there weren't support series going on either. Like, maybe
I don't know because I've not checked the full schedule. I've not watched anything other than the F1. I think if there were anything, it was sort of American-based series probably, or like local stuff. Sarah in chat saying there was some local stuff going on.
Okay.
Like none of the let's call them usual support series like F2, F3, Porsche Super Cup, etc. were there. To my knowledge, anyway. So yeah, interesting that they
right.
Yeah.
Should we talk predictions?
Yes. A very interesting week. I mean, I feel like that while Verstappen's in this form, there's almost a guaranteed 2 points for most people, unless they go a bit bold like what I tried. Yeah. So I still managed 2 points, though. I got 18 finishes, right? You got 3 points, Chris, Verstappen, and Sargent as first DNF. And Stu got a double points as well for the double Verstappen. However, we got out of the listenership a full 5 out of 5. So congratulations to Tom Hardesty. As 2 races in a row now, we've had a 5 out of 5, I believe.
Oh, congratulations.
Second one of the season. So reach out to us however you can, Tom. I will contact you via the site anyway, as I normally do. But yeah, get in touch with us another way if it's easier. You have earned a full 5 out of 5 for the Canadian Grand Prix.
Congrats.
In terms of everybody else, I mean, there were a huge number of 4s in there. Most were the ambiguous Kevin Magnussen finishing position. Slight shout out to, in some degree, to Christian Swadoba, who, I hope I'm saying that right, who basically almost got a 5 out of 5, but had Russell rather than Sargent, and was probably hoping Russell had retired when he hit the wall, because I think that was before Sargent had gone out, maybe. I can't remember. But
Ooh, not sure, actually.
I can't remember the exact timeline of things, but very close nonetheless.
Yeah.
Yeah, another insane week where like 250 people or something scored at least 2 points or more. So a very big points haul over the course of this weekend. And in terms of the overall standings, that means Benjamin Claxton is at the top currently with 19 points. And then there's a few people tied for second on 18. We've got Ash Foster, James Hunt, and Effortless Lee. Speaking of Effortless Lee, I'm going to jump straight to Grid Rival, because that's a name that we know from Grid Rival standings usually. So this week's Grid Rival winner for the Canadian Grand Prix was Reporpoist, which I love that name, with 1,082 points. But Effortlessly is still at the top of that championship altogether on 8,009. So well done to you there, Lee. And then in terms of the F1 fantasy, the official F1 game, Jose Silva was our winner this week with 272 points. And then in terms of like the overall standings, it's still as it was with the Spinquisition leading the way there, 2,429 points there now. If you want to get involved with any of this, whether it's predictions or the fantasy leagues or anything like that, just head to backofthegrid.com and you can sign up for the Predictions League. And there's also a little section on there that links to both of the fantasy leagues if you want to get involved with either of those. And predictions are always worth doing because, as you've heard over the last couple of races, there's a prize if you get a 5 out of 5. So join in.
Should we finish with some inbox?
Let's finish with some inbox.
Keep it saying now. But stay out. Box. Hey, man.
Shall I start us off?
Yeah.
First, from our very own Stu, who sounds the big opinion klaxon. I bang on this drum a lot, but we need better, more consistent stewarding. I felt the Norris penalty was A, harsh, and B, inconsistently applied. Why would this transgression, in inverted commas, attract a punishment at one race and be overlooked at another? On the same subject, Sarah adds, has anyone else ever been punished for creating a gap to be able to double stack? And then in the interest of balance, McCheco says, hey man, would butter melt in Lando Norris's mouth? And I feel like I'm also in a bit of a minority here, but I do think, like, the rules say you can't do that. And he, like...
Yeah.
In isolation, he did a thing that is against the rules. It's hard to argue against that penalty. Is it a penalty that's applied consistently? Absolutely not. I think some of the chat mentioned Bottas got a penalty or maybe got a warning for doing something similar a number of years ago when he was still at Mercedes, but it's not something that comes up very often. And like they all do it up to a point, don't they?
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm with you, to be fair. I think that, you know, when it's very clear it's been done, there is a penalty to be had because, like you say, it's a break of the established rules. But I think this needs to be like some sort of, I guess, marker for the rest of the season that if anyone was to do anything similar, they also got the same penalty. And I'd also like to see it dealt with quicker. Like, they opened it up for investigation quite quickly from what I remember. And then, as I was saying earlier, it wasn't decided until 20 odd laps later, and he'd already taken his pit stop. Like, in terms of that, like, although it favoured Norris and McLaren, as I said earlier, that had a negative effect for anyone that was actually behind him at the time, because they would have had an opportunity to be in front of him had he served that during a pit stop and not had to like fight him to overtake. It would have been more of a defensive situation that they were in. So it could have completely changed the context of some people's race in reality. I mean, you've only got to look at how many positions he dropped because of it to see like how many other cars he'd have had to fight through in the first place to even be in contention with fighting for points. So, yeah, I think stuff like that does need dealing with quicker, especially when you've got cars in such close proximity to each other that it makes that big of a difference. So, yeah, like I say, not necessarily got a problem with the penalty, just more how it's been handled overall.
Yeah, totally.
Moving on to the next one. Bird Lightfoot says, "Hi guys, really enjoyed listening to the podcast and played predictions game." Well, thank you, Bird. But I just wondered if the podium on Sunday is actually the highest in terms of number of championships, with Hamilton on 7, Vettel on 2, and Alonso on 2. That was 11 total. There must have been a Schumacher podium with other champions that may rival that.
We've been trying to work this out in the Discord over the last couple of days, and we have come to the conclusion that this is the most drivers' championships there's ever been together on a podium. There was one that I believe, I think Schumacher's only podium for Mercedes, which he shared with Hamilton, but Hamilton obviously had less championships to his name at that point.
Mm-hmm.
There was another one where I think Kimi, Hamilton, and Verstappen shared a podium, but again, it was like before some of them won their championships. But yeah, this we're pretty certain this is the most there's ever been. And apparently they did it in Melbourne as well. It was the same top 3. So, yeah, there's your answer.
And I suppose as well, it depends on which championship you're counting, because there's plenty of Constructors' Championships under Adrian Newey's belt that were also. I was
going to say, if you include Newey as well, it's, yeah.
Whole different count.
A very long way.
Yeah. Yep.
Next question from Cody B. Who would you rather see in Lance Stroll's seat at Aston Martin, and who would perform best? Ooh. Danny Rick, Alex Albon, or Charles Leclerc?
I mean, as a fan of the man, I would say Danny Rick. I think Albon would give it a good go as well, though. Albon would be very interesting seeing a car like that.
I think he could be good there.
I don't really want to see Charles moving there, though. Like, Charles can stay at Ferrari, thank you. Leave him there. He made his bed.
Of those 3, I think... Yeah, I think I'd like to see Albon get a shot in a team that's not part of the Red Bull family or the back of the grid team that he's currently in. So, yeah, I'm going to go Albon.
Fair. Mike P says, "Hey man, on paper the Canadian GP wasn't very exciting. However, it was an entertaining race to watch. Is this because it had good TV direction that showed a lot of the action live? Can bad TV direction make a race boring to watch?"
So I think someone in the Discord earlier on said this is actually the smallest number of overtakes there's been in a race this season, including Monaco.
Yeah, it was something like 20, I think, wasn't it? Yeah. On track overtakes. That is for position. Yeah.
But it didn't feel like that at all.
Exactly.
And yeah, I do think this season in general, I think they've been doing a really good job of TV direction. And this race in particular was very good. They're using sort of interesting camera angles. They seem to be like watching the right things. Like somebody made the point that like obviously there's helmet cam, which they often just cut to just because we've got helmet cam, let's show it. Whereas this race, it felt like they used it in an interesting way at interesting points. Like there was one of Norris's overtakes where you saw the build up from the outside. They cut to his helmet cam in the braking zone, and then cut back to an external shot for the rest of the corner, which worked really well. And it's not just using the cameras you've got for the sake of them. He's actually giving it some thought and using them in interesting ways. So yeah, I think they're doing a really good job from that side of things this year.
It's like they've put someone who understands motorsport and racing in charge of directing the cameras instead of just a general director who doesn't understand motorsport and racing.
Next question.
Is it me or is it you? I thought it was you.
Oh, is it me? It's me.
I think it's you.
Next from Adam Busby. Hey man, without the damage on Alonso's car, do you think there could have been a closer fight during the race? Max didn't drive off into the sunset like previous races. And what could this mean for the second half of the season?
Interesting. I think there's a combination of that, isn't there? There's an element that Alonso was definitely fuel saving for whatever reason, whether that was because of an issue or because of them like fueling the car light for pace. It doesn't really matter the reasons. Like we know that he was doing that, and I think Max and Red Bull took that as an opportunity to like kind of coast a little bit themselves. So it would be very interesting to see them both at full pace. But I think Max and Red Bull had enough in hand that had Alonso been at full pace, they could have probably responded and maintained the gap they had. I feel like Aston are getting closer, but not close enough that they're like a huge threat right now. Although, having said that, you've only got to look at where Perez is compared to Alonso, I suppose.
Yeah. I just think there were too many variables this race to draw any massive conclusions from it.
Yeah.
But the Aston Martin upgrade does seem to be
a good one.
A good one, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Next one, Z Good Dad says, De Vries versus Magnussen battle looked dangerous. Should De Vries have been penalised for cutting off Magnussen going into the corner?
I think he probably should have.
I think there should have been something probably, but mainly because of like how, like the sort of the dangerous bit of it, I would say, is the way that they end up having to rejoin the circuit. Like reversing down that slip road and back into. I mean, to be fair, they managed to sort of almost 3-point turn it to some degree, like kind of reverse it round and then rejoin the track forwards. But as you pointed out, Chris, like one of them pulled out pretty much in front of Verstappen as he was heading into the braking zone for that chicane. So wasn't ideal.
And it just felt inevitable as well, the way they'd been like banging wheels for 2 or 3 corners beforehand. Like the whole thing was just pretty poor all round. But I think if you had to apply blame, De Vries is definitely where you'd be looking, I would say.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Final question this week from Peter Willington. I think this weekend we saw 4 world-class drivers show the difference between them and their very good teammates. The 3 on the podium are obvious, but who do you think is the 4th and should maybe be looked at for another top shot at a top team?
I think what's interesting about this is Peter clearly has a 4th in mind, but wants us to provide it. There's no like sub part to that question that says, just so you know, this is my opinion. There's just there was clearly 4. Who was the 4th? It's like a riddle. I mean, I think Norris is one of them, and
I think he means Norris as well.
To be fair,
would you describe Logan Sargent as his very good teammate? I'm not sure you would.
Therein lies the reason I jumped to Norris first, because despite the penalty situation being a bit of a smudge on the overall performance, the rest of it was stellar, and Piastri also had a very good race. And when you compare the two, like that, it's just like that little step above. But I mean, Albon was a very good drive, so I think he's probably in contention up here. I can only imagine that the comment is directed at Norris, but
I think so. both Norris and Piastri are driving so well this season.
Yeah. And bearing in mind, Piastri is a rookie.
Yeah. It's a shame the car is where it is because he's having very, very good. Well, I mean, it's not a huge surprise. Like anyone who watched the junior series know what Piastri can do. So it's not the hugest surprise in the world, but it's still nice to see that he's having as good a time of it as he is.
Yeah, definitely.
And that about brings us to the end this week. So thank you, everybody, as ever, for listening and for watching. If you're watching on YouTube, do all the good stuff like subscribe, comment, all those things. We haven't been getting many inbox questions through YouTube comments yet, but feel free to drop questions on the YouTube videos and we'll pick them up for the next episode. If you want to get in touch with us, you can also contact us through the website, backthegrid.com, which is also where all of the Predictions League stuff is, as well as links to our Grid Rival and Fantasy F1. We're also on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all of that stuff. If you want to find out about our Discord, you can go to patreon.com/backofthegrid and see how to get involved there. But I think that is all the things. So we'll be back in a week's time to preview the Austrian Grand Prix? The Austrian Grand Prix.
Yes.
Which I believe will be the first sprint race of this. No, it won't. I think it'll be the second sprint race of the season because we had one in Baku, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yes. So we're back in a week's time to preview all of that stuff. But until then, thanks again for joining us and goodbye.
Bye, everyone.